Welcome to the Zain Battla podcast. If you know me, you know I'm a person who loves conversations, whether it's about passions or ideas or current events. If you don't know me personally, then maybe you'll figure out that I'm not really a subject matter expert in anything, but I do consider myself a person who knows a little bit about a lot of things. I want to take you on this journey with me of continuing to learn. In the beginning, I'm going to be bringing guests within my network, and as a Muslim American, a lot of people will be coming from that community. I hope that you continue to join me on this journey, and I want to thank you for listening. Mohamed Al-Hendy, thank you for coming today. I appreciate, you just came back from a trip from Iceland, and I'm sure you're tired, exhausted, but I appreciate you taking the time out. I want to hear about this trip of yours in Iceland.
Well, it was amazing, honestly. We went for about 4-5 days or so. We left on Sunday and came back on Thursday. And Iceland, listen, it's a freezing cold place, but it's a really beautiful place. There's the old story about how Greenland is misnamed because it's really just all ice, and Iceland is misnamed because it's a ton of green. It's true. Even in the winter, when you think it might be covered by snow, it was really beautiful to check out the landscape.
Wow. And I hear that it's almost a different experience if you go in the summer versus in the winter, in terms of the length of the days and the weather.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that it's a more beautiful country to check out in the summer. I will readily concede that. The days do get very short there. We landed at like 6:30, probably got, on the road at 8, and really everywhere across America that you're out on the road at 8, the sun is out, and it was still pitch black at that time. And the sun goes down there at 4:30, so it's a very short day. It's cloudy, it's rainy, it's windy. The weather is not kind, but the people really are. And I would say, like, despite kind of whatever the weather conditions were, people just had really uplifted spirits. Our tour guide for all of it was just such a positive person, and everything was still really beautiful.
That's awesome. I mean, I know you're either one of the most well-traveled guys I know or the most well-traveled guy I know. Where does this rank in terms of the echelon of all of your international trips?
Yeah, so I was talking about that with my wife when we were heading back. What I really liked about this trip was that it was so beautifully like short and sweet, right? Like we flew 6 hours from Chicago, right? Direct, and we flew 6 hours back. Just a 6-hour time difference, like super smooth. Now, in terms of the actual experience, I would put it right amongst like the very good trips, right? So there's like, I haven't really formulated a perfect scale, but in my mind, it's like bad, okay, good, very good, amazing, right? And so I'd put it in that 4 category because, like I said, we had waterfalls, volcanoes, geysers, historical sites. We saw the Northern Lights slightly, but we still saw them. I went horseback riding. Got to see so much. Had amazing food. Icelandic waffles.
Really?
Icelandic waffles, bro. It's another level. They put these sugar crystals in the waffles. And I had the most amazing salmon. So like, I could go on and on, but like food, experiences, and everything all compacted into this wonderful like 4-day segment. I couldn't really ask for more. I mean, I could. That would put it in category 5, but still pretty darn.
So what is a category 5 trip or destination?
Category 5 has got to be like life-changing. You know those trips you go on and like you've rediscovered your life's purpose and like you're like, I never knew this existed. I never knew that I could like discover myself in this way. I haven't had many of those. One I had that's kind of like that was Malaysia. I went to Malaysia in 2019. And it was just me and a friend, and my friend ditched me halfway through, so it was just me at the end. And it was just like, I don't know, is like one of those like coming of age trips, right? Like I've never been a solo traveler, still am not, and I usually like to have things kind of pre-planned and so on. That trip was neither of those things, and yet it just kept working out perfectly. I'd just like look up what to do, I'd go do it, I'd see this beautiful sight. I'd feel this really great peace. I remember in Malaysia, there was like this one masjid that was like on the water. Wow. And it's one of the only masjids in the water, like in the world. Like there's only a handful of them. And I remember just sitting there and I'd be like, wow, like it's a beautiful, it was right on the ocean. You just look out, it's perfectly still. The moon is coming down. I just look around, I'm like, subhanAllah. And what was really cool is like, it's such a multicultural country that like, I think 20 minutes before that, I had come down from a hill that had a Hindu temple at the top, and which was actually right beside another masjid. So it's just very cool. There's just so many like aspects of Malaysian culture, and again, just the warmth of the people that made it a 5 for me. And again, I could take the whole podcast telling you all about what made it that amazing, but it's just an example of like a 5 trip.
Wow. And how old were you when you went on that trip, or how long ago was it?
It was 2019. I think it was a few months before COVID began, or maybe it was 2018. When was COVID?
COVID was 2020.
Okay, so then 2019 it is. What if I do the math? I was maybe 27.
I asked instead when it happened instead of how old were you, because we wouldn't have to share your age to the public, but
it's okay.
Considering your trips, I know you're a huge soccer guy.
Yep.
You went to the World Cup 2022. You went to the World Cup 2018.
Yes.
How was going for the purpose of seeing, the World Cup versus actually traveling just to travel?
So World Cups are incredible, right? I would say that I was far less prepared for 2018 than 2022. So I kind of felt like a veteran by the time I got 2022. I knew what was going on, how it works. World Cups are fascinating because they take on the culture of where they're occurring, and they also just bring the whole world in at the same time, right? And so you have all these like fascinating tensions that just all kind of come together. In Russia, this was really interesting because Russia is not a country that is accustomed to bringing in tourists, right? And so I think a lot of locals don't really know what to do with it and whatnot, but it was still amazing. I always think back to this one experience I had in Russia where, as a poor planning traveler, I had not brought my passport with me. I'd brought only my ID, and they were like, "What is this?" So, like, your Texas driver license? What are we supposed to do with that? And I remember we were based in St. Petersburg. That was our home base. And we had gone to Moscow for a game. On the way back from Moscow, I went to the wrong train station, right? And so my dad and my brother, who'd gone on the trip with me, they left, and I was kind of stranded. I was stranded without my passport. So I was like, oh, shit, what do I do? And I kind of went to the Russian ticket lady, pleaded with her. She probably understood half of what I said. But I was like, I just need a train back to St. Petersburg. And
how long is the train Moscow, St. Petersburg?
8 hours.
Wow.
And there's a lightning train, but that was the one my dad and my brother went on. I missed that one. There was no more for the day. And so she was like, I can get you on an overnight. As for the fact that you forgot your passport and have just your ID, good luck. Try to convince the people that it's okay. So she gets me a ticket. I go and beg and plead with the guy at the train. I'm like, literally, you're going to have this homeless guy on your streets if you don't let me on this train. And eventually I got on, and what was really fascinating about it was this incredible like melting pot, if you will, of different cultures. I bunked with a Moroccan, an Algerian, and I think maybe a Brazilian. We went to the lunchroom, and the Croatians were celebrating a goal they just scored against Argentina, while the French were planning their party and how they were going to celebrate and prepare for the next game. Just everybody all together interacting. I met a Brazilian who was married to a Jewish lady who was a judge in Brazil. Like just weird scenarios of just the whole world mixed up all together.
Wow. And then this recent trip.
Yeah, and Qatar was far less crazy, although it was amazing for very different reasons. Qatar, it was a country that doesn't, outside of the World Cup really have much of a population, right? Like Qatar, the UAE are well known for being countries that are extremely wealthy with a very small indigenous population, right? And so they kind of set up a lot of artificial housing, artificial campsites, and so on for people to engage with the World Cup and so on. So there's a lot less of the risk because you kind of just feel like, oh, the country is like literally catering to you, as opposed to Russia, which was like, yeah, we'll deal with you guys while you're here. But the audiences were amazing. It was kind of this time in history when it felt like everybody was marching to the same beat and it was the right beat. Right. If you remember from the news coverage there was a lot of coverage of people waving Palestinian flags, people speaking up for the unity of the Arab world. You had Saudi Arabia had its historic win over Argentina and how everybody was so excited about that. You had Saudi Arabian bloggers saying like, this is not only the time we felt most proud about our country, but the time we felt the most love and support from our neighbors. And to some extent, you could say that was what gave birth to the multi-billion-dollar spending spree of the Saudi government on soccer, because they realized just how powerful it is. And all of those kind of streams of energy, bursts of energy, emerged from that World Cup and made it kind of its own special, magnificent thing. And in 4 years, inshallah, we'll have one in our backyard. I think probably here in Chicago as well.
Yeah. I was looking at the map. I don't know if there's one specifically in Chicago.
Well, I can tell you that there are several in Texas. So yes. If they're not here, then
they'll be in Texas.
Come down and we'll take care of it.
There's one in, I think, Mexico City or...
Dallas has the final, and Mexico City, I think, has several big games as well.
Wow.
So it's all kind of in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about the upcoming World Cup, but I guess before we segue into that, did it seem like with the 2022 World Cup that all the, I guess, shenanigans that the Qatari government, such as, finessing the 2022 date, because there some sort of scandal with that? Sure. And then there was also the amount of workers that were working in poor working conditions and dying. Did it feel like everybody just kind of pushed that aside?
We have to kind of take each of these things one by one. FIFA is undoubtedly, I don't think I'm saying anything that controversial here, a fairly corrupt governing body of soccer. It doesn't say the whole thing is rotten or anything, but just to say that it has a long history of scandals and people being bought off by money and so on. So the Qatari World Cup has a questionable kind of history, but honestly, so did the Russian World Cup, so did several World Cups before it, right? So that's like one issue that we put to the side. In terms of workers dying, it is absolutely a tragedy, something that's very sad. It is also something, again, that happens for many World Cups. South Africa had numerous reports of this. Russia didn't have as many reports of workers dying, but it had a lot of reports of stadiums being built in cities that would never use them and that actually needed the money for much more basic needs, such as like food and infrastructure for its people, right? So these are always tough questions to deal with. I undoubtedly, believe that Qatar should take better care of its workers, better care of the people who they bring in to work on, stadium building or other types of these tasks. But I don't think it's a reason to condemn a World Cup, right?
Yeah, I guess I didn't come to the realization that it's happened in so many other World Cups. Yeah. It seems that all the eyes were at the attention of the Qatar one.
And again, this is something kind of we see a little bit of a repeat now, unfortunately, with some of the coverage of Gaza, Palestine, and Israel, is that there is always a little bit of bias that enters the coverage for these things, right? You might recall before the Qatar World Cup, there was so much coverage about how boycott the Qatar World Cup. They don't respect those who are of a homosexual or bisexual background. Boycott the Qatar World Cup. They told us we could have all the alcohol we wanted, and then they banned it in the last minute, right? And there's always this tension of like, here's how we see Western civilization, and this is, we believe every country, regardless of their own moral code, religion, and so on, should embrace it wholeheartedly, right? And anyone who went there, to be honest, will tell you that there was a beauty in some of the principles that the Qataris stuck to. The fact that there was no alcohol, that's probably the first World Cup that's done that, and it produced a great environment. You had numerous people coming from Western countries who told you that I've never had such a peaceful game day environment. I've never been to a match where there's not a massive brawl because two intoxicated fans have decided to start fighting each other, right? That's a huge benefit. I think I went to 8 games or something. I certainly didn't see any sort of oppression of those who, have a different sexual orientation than myself. Now, that isn't to say that didn't happen, right? I don't want to say just because I didn't see it, it didn't happen, because that kind of logic is used by people incorrectly all the time. But I do think it's blown up a little bit bigger than it is. And I also think there needs to be a respect for a nation's culture and its religion. And I think Qatar was very respectful to its visitors, and I think it deserved the same respect.
Got it. Understood. And then that's how we get into with 2026, because I know you brought up the fact that throughout previous World Cups, there's also been incidents of bad working conditions and workers unfortunately dying. And it also makes me think back to when the World Cup was in Brazil. There was a picture that was circulating of the nice stadium that was built in Rio. Okay. But on the outside of that stadium, it was just people on the streets, and it was just very bad conditions that, instead of putting the money into building this stadium, they could have helped the people around them. And then I think in the sense that where a lot of people's heads are at now is, we have a homeless crisis, we have a crisis of, and even if you don't take the crises that America's going through, you think about how bad our public transportation is. And I'm just thinking of all these Europeans and maybe people from Asian countries that have amazing public transit coming into the US and then trying to think that, oh yeah, I'll just catch whatever public transit they have going and go from game to game that way. Mm-hmm. But they're going to be very surprised when they come here and realize that logistically it's not going to work out as easily as they were hoping.
I agree, but money has a magical way of solving a lot of problems. There's a saying, it's like money can't buy happiness, but it can make a lot of things much easier. Right. And so, I do think the transportation problem's a little overblown, right? When I went to Russia, yeah, they had public transport. It wasn't that good. I wasn't in South Africa, but it's a country that, outside of a few cities, is not well connected, and they figured it out, right? Brazil, also a massive country, don't really know much about their public transport. They figured it out. I think that if your intention is to kind of just like go all around the country catching every single game day after day, you might have some trouble. But if you're planning to cover, the games that are concentrated within Texas, you're going to figure out how to jump on a bus, a Von Lane, a Greyhound. Have I shouted out all the transportation companies yet?
You forgot Flixbus. You forgot Megabus.
There we go. You'll figure it out. There's always a long list of logistical issues that have to be solved. I mean, Qatar literally had to build like 10,000 homes, and they figured it out. They said, all right, why not? We'll build them. No one's going to live in them after, because literally probably like a ghost town now. But they got it done, and so will the U.S. undoubtedly, and Canada and Mexico.
So it does seem that you still have, heavy interest and involvement within the sports area, especially soccer, and you did do sports writing in your past. I guess, did you continue or did you stop at some point? Did you get busy with other parts of your life that prevented you from continuing to excel there?
Yes, to some of that. Let me try to walk through it. So I've always had an interesting relationship with sports, right? I kind of growing up in a pretty traditional Egyptian family, my dad was a huge soccer guy. And as a young, kid, and then even as a young teen, I did what most people do, which is they reject what their parents push on them, right? I played soccer as a kid, and I was like, I'm tired of just doing what you tell me to do, and I don't really see the appeal of the sport. I'm out, right? We moved to Houston when I was about 8 or 9 or 10, and basketball was the name of the game here, right? And so that's what I took up, and that was what I was really into. But then, as kids are wont to do, over time, I wanted to kind of reconnect with my roots and kind of take a look at some of the things I'd previously discarded and rediscovered soccer. And so that happened kind of in my later teens. And then in college, I wanted to go one step further and start, kind of talking about it. And so I discovered Bleacher Report, and I applied to be a writer at the time. They were not owned by Time Warner, much smaller company. And I was accepted as a writer, made my way up through the ranks, and became a kind of a paid writer and covered all sorts of sports around the world, I should say all sorts of soccer around the world. So both MLS to EPL to La Liga, Serie A, European soccer, Egyptian soccer, a little bit of Asian probably. I still remain very interested in it. As an interesting kind of part of that process, I kind of dabbled in a whole bunch of things. So very proudly, I actually helped found the first Egyptian-focused soccer blog. It remains the biggest one, and it remains like the one that makes all the breaking news announcements. It's heavily cited by all sorts of people. Shout out Mohamed Salah, because he's responsible for probably 65% of our traffic. So there's that. I started my own blog at some point with a team of writers who I think have gone on to have really impressive careers in that space. And so I look fondly on those days. And then, as again, many people go through, you talk to your parents and you say, hey, I'm really enjoying this. And they're like, okay, cool. Like as a hobby. I'm like, well, I'm doing pretty good with it, And they're like, let's sit down, let's talk. You have the following career options as a choice. It can be any type of doctor you want. Maybe a lawyer if you absolutely don't want to be a doctor, and maybe a couple other careers. And so, I kind of did my back and forth with them on that, and then I eventually chose to go to law school, and I have no regrets, alhamdulillah. It was a very fun time. I still look fondly on it. I still love to talk sports, but I'm glad with what I did in that space.
And since you pursued law, have you been involved mostly within the corporate law space, or has there been other areas? I know that at some point you were interning for the Obama administration, and then you also did the clerkship for the judge.
That's true.
So I remember those days. At least the judge, not the Obama. You're too
long commutes and busy days. Yeah. No. So let's see. So corporate law generally is like a kind of amorphous term, right? What I do is commercial litigation, right? It's litigation for major companies who retain big law firms to help them handle the cases that go to court. I think that's what I envision doing in some respect. I mean, my application essay to law school was I hope to change the world via the mechanisms of international law and so on. And sometimes I do. I will say just this other day, we successfully petitioned the U.S. government for asylum for one of our Afghan refugee clients, right? So, alhamdulillah, I still get to do some pretty cool stuff on the pro bono side. And on the billable commercial client side, I get to do some pretty cool stuff that is not as much in the same vein of helping underprivileged and so on, but in kind of taking on interesting and challenging cases and coming up with creative solutions to problems that arise in complex commercial settings.
So going from, going from on your application saying, I'm going to change the world, to being a corporate litigator, do you feel that you still have that ambition or passion to still follow suit with what you put on your application?
So I think that, as I've gone through my career and through school and developing as a human being, ambitions shift, right? I still remember very clearly being in law school and being like, you know what? My goal here is to get a government job in DC, maybe go work for DOJ or something, and I'm going to work my way up in DOJ and really become one of the top lawyers for the government, right? I had like so much faith in the government at the time, and I just felt like that was where I could do the most good. Partially because I've had different life experiences, and partially because my faith in the government may not be at the same level anymore. That is no longer a big ambition, right? And so, has the person who wrote that essay changed? Undoubtedly. Is his goal, or have his goals shifted dramatically? No, I don't think so. Like I still ask myself year over year, what am I doing to position myself to do the most good for the people I care about, right? And that includes not just my family and my fellow Americans, but my fellow Muslim Americans, my fellow Arabs, the poor, the needy, like all of these groups matter to me. And, I kind of do an internal analysis to say like, is my trajectory still going in a place where I feel like it's rising like this? Or am I plateauing? Am I descending? Am I losing track? And alhamdulillah, like I said, when I do that analysis, even if some of it is biased and self-serving, I do feel like I'm still in this direction. But change is one of those crazy things where it's like it can take forever to make something happen, and also change can happen like that, right? Yeah. And so I try to balance, making any sort of drastic moves, feeling too strongly about one particular event or issue in my career, with the big picture of, am I still continuing to grow and develop in a way where I can provide value and benefit to my community and my people? Yes, then let's keep going.
When you interned for the Obama administration, that was probably one of those times where you still had trust in the government. You're probably dabbing up Obama and Joe Biden, thinking that they were your homies. I guess, what was your experience there, and then how are you reflecting on that now?
So, alhamdulillah, I got very close with President Obama and Joe Biden, but I never dapped them up. I'm still down. If at any point they check out this podcast and they hear that I'm wanting to dap them up, I'm happy to do that. Not Biden, maybe. Sorry, Biden.
Obama did sign that check, though. That 3.8 million a year.
Here's how I feel. So when I was working as an intern in the Obama administration, it was one of the most kind of magical feelings of life, right? You really do get swept up in the feeling that the work you're doing in the EEOB or in the Obama government is work that, you might never get a chance to do again, or is magical every day. There's a new bill being signed, a new issue being tackled, and things just move like that. I remember again, as an intern, you're an intern, right? Your guys just helping move things along. But I remember I worked in the Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, right, which deals with all the religious organizations around the country and kind of being a liaison with them. And I remember every single Islamic organization in the country just thinking I was the most incredible person, right? Islamic Relief would be like, Mohamed, you made it. You're one of our people is in here doing things. Yeah. So I remember that felt really cool. To address my faith in the government, I again, this kind of goes to what I was just saying a few minutes ago, which is I try to make sure I never go too much this way or that way. Right? Is my faith in the government less now than it was then? Undoubtedly, right? Am I at a point where I think that the government is beyond saving, or the government is inherently bad? No. Unfortunately, in my opinion, you have a lot of young politicians, mashallah, in my opinion, the Squad and people like them, who have really bright ideas that are threatening to a lot of people, right? And politicians, more than anything, is a field and an industry where a lot of old heads stay in power for a long time, and they stay in power by adhering to the same playbook that has been used for years and years, decades and decades. But we didn't have a Squad, I think back in 2008. We didn't have a Squad before that, right? That's a new development. And, the awareness going on in social media right now about what's happening in Gaza is a new development, right? It really doesn't have a precedent to it before today, which is to say that, I think it's an MLK quote that I might be paraphrasing a bit, which is, the arc of the universe is long, takes a long time to get there, but it bends to justice, right? Which is to say that, am I proud of any of the decisions we've made regarding our foreign policy in the last few months? Probably not. I could say definitely not. But do I think that we will never get it right? No. I think at some point we will get the right advisors, the right politicians, the right leaders in the right positions to make better judgments that benefit not only those outside of the U.S., but those inside the U.S. as well.
And that starts with people like us speaking up, or even if it's not just with Gaza, it's with, people want healthcare, people want the ability to get an education without taking a massive loan. These are issues that are at the forefront. And I feel that not just Democrats, but Republicans too have a concern for where the country's heading, and they have very different ways of addressing it. But when it comes to the actual representatives that we have in office, their focus is not on the people. Their focus is on what the corporations that are paying their campaigns, what do they want to, what legislation do they want to see pass?
Yeah, so as you might be able to tell from the tone of my answers, I am always a seat at the table type person, right? I think that some people believe, the institution is corrupt, the institution is deeply flawed, burn it down or reject it or whatever. And while I think a lot of those criticisms can be legitimate, I do think that the way things move forward is to come with your opinions, not waver from your principles, but find the way to deliver them with the right language and the right methods to get them incorporated. And so, healthcare, education, foreign policy, whatever your issue is, I think these are things that need substantially new input, kind of contrasted to the folks who've been handling it so far. And I think that hopefully through organizations such as your 99 Coalition and through the work of a lot of hard-working young men and women, those voices can get a seat at the table and make a difference moving forward.
Yeah, no, that would be great. That we feel like we have a voice, and I think the current situation, whether it's regarding Gaza or whether it's regarding previous atrocities, whether it's here, school shooting, or it's a mass shooting, or any other type of atrocity, COVID, it feels that because we have things like social media now and people are learning about, hey, this has been going on for XYZ, and hey, this is what our politicians are doing. Hey, this is the average age of a member of Congress. It's that people are, I don't want to say people are losing trust, but they're at least uncovering the masks that were previously there, uncovering the barriers that were previously there. So with that said, what would you say is, I'm not expecting you to have a solution, but what can someone at home who's watching this podcast do as a call to action?
Yeah, I mean, so many things, right? I mean, make sure that you are. Let me say it this way, right? I'm a religious person. I always like to go back to the hadith. There's a hadith of the Prophet, which ironically, President Biden, I think himself had shared at some point, which is, when you see something wrong, when you see something that you disagree with, there are 3 levels of response, right? One is to take action, right? So if you have the ability to donate, great. If you have the ability to mobilize folks, great. If you have the ability to join organizations, wonderful. If you have the ability to write papers, to write articles, to engage in discussions with your fellow coworkers, people, and so on, all that's wonderful. Do those things, right? If you can't, then use your words, right? Speak with people, tweet, post, text, get out the message, right? And then at the bottom level is what you do in your heart, right? Don't accept injustice. Don't accept things that are wrong as just the inevitable, unchangeable status quo, right? That's how things kind of consolidate, or how they firm up, is that people just accept them, right? But so long as you're constantly pushing, it's kind of like, coming back from Iceland, so I'll use this as an example. It's kind of like the rainwater that falls on the rock over and over again, right? And as it falls, it creates more and more cracks, right? And the rock becomes more porous. And all of a sudden, before you know it, this like rock hard table or whatever that seems like nothing could ever break through it, the cracks get wider, and they crack, right? I think it's the exact same thing, is that a persistent wave of belief and speaking the truth in whatever manner and method that you have the ability to do makes a difference. That's what I'd recommend.
I think that's all really great advice. I think I want to shift the gears here a little bit, because I think something that's really important to highlight is that you've seen things as a corporate litigator. You've seen things under the Obama administration. You've also seen things as a teacher, because you worked with Teach for America. So I would want to shift gears there, just because seeing things from the lens of a educator, especially in our current federal school system, it'd be interesting to see how this all ties in. That because of education, we always hear, education is a very important focus, and it's essentially the foundation for everything else. What pros and cons did you see throughout your time with Teach for America, or just being a teacher in general, that you're like, hey, this is what is right with our education system, and this is a clear criticism or clear need for improvement?
Yeah. What's right with our education system? Very little. Look, I think that our education system is one of those things that as I kind of was discussing earlier, would benefit a lot from an increased amount of money. There are very small things that you can do to make education just substantially better for kids across America. And I should say that these are not issues that apply to everyone. Like Teach for America particularly targets schools and communities in underprivileged neighborhoods to kind of try to uplift them, right? So some people don't have these issues, right? If you went to a school where your class size was somewhere between 10 to 15 and you had all the textbooks you need and all the supplies you need, and like already you are at a far better place than the communities that I worked in and that several other people work in, right? Because it's well established in academia that just by providing students with reasonable class sizes, that means 10 to 20 kids in a classroom instead of 30 to 35, you improve outcomes substantially, right? By making sure that they have the textbooks they need and the tools that they need to answer their questions and so on. It makes things a lot better. Money doesn't solve everything, right? Again, but it can make things a lot better. those are kind of the issues at the forefront of my mind. I was an elementary school teacher, right? And so really, as I saw it, right, my duty, I was a first grade particularly, my duty was less about like teaching really groundbreaking topics. I mean, I taught like basic math. I taught really introductory science, some little social studies here and there, and a good amount of reading. But again, these are just like the initial footsteps, right? What I'm really doing is providing discipline, structure, social integration to kids who are experiencing it for like the first times in their life. And again, that all is made much easier when you have the resources you need to do it right. When you're a kid in a small class, like a classroom packed with 30 other kids of all different backgrounds and so on, it can get really overwhelming, and you start kind of tagging on to what the dominant behaviors are, right? So it becomes very challenging for the teacher to establish order in the class when there's so much kind of different tensions going on. And it becomes difficult for the kid to feel at ease and at peace if the hair's teacher is on fire, right? If the teacher's hair is on fire. Those are the number one issues. There's a long list of issues I could go through, but those are, I think, certainly some of the first things that addressing would be very good to do.
Yeah, because one thing that I feel that I've seen from my experiences is that the schools that tend to be more well-funded, the teachers have less stress, they have a smaller class size, those end up producing better students in the long run, or better. It makes complete sense that would be, that input creates that output.
Improving education is almost like, it's kind of scary how simple it is, right? Like, you provide a kid with a proper a proper home environment, like outcomes are like already much higher, right? You provide them with a proper class size, much higher. You provide them with the proper resources to be able to answer their questions, do their homework, and keep up with the materials much better, right? This is before we've done anything about how do I make sure that my kid is memorizing how multiplication works or how division works. This is before we get into any of the actual subject matter. But just by doing the basics, right, in terms of improving environment, improving structure, and providing discipline, outcomes already go much higher. So in that case, it's kind of simple.
It sounds a lot simpler than, it probably is simpler. It's just, it seems that no one is putting the focus on the actual, listening to what the teachers are saying, because even...
Well, no one wants to spend the money.
No one wants to spend the money.
We'd rather send the money instead to foreign countries who may or may not have our best interests in mind.
If you look at the European model, for example, it's the teachers are seen at the same professional level as a doctor or an engineer or lawyer or whatever other professional career. And it seems that teaching here is just seen as, if you're making 40, 50K as a teacher, that's what you deserve. Oh, you have summer vacation. But what people don't realize is that a lot of the teachers, they work through the summer in order to increase their pay. They have to pay for their supplies, and then the job continuously gets more and more stressful as the class sizes increase. And I even tell this to a lot of people that I would love to be a teacher if the money was right. Obviously, at 50, 60K being the sole provider in a household, it's not attainable. So I feel more people would approach the teaching profession if we just valued it more in America, which we don't, unfortunately. Yeah,
so on the list of issues I think that could be improved in the education system, I actually have teacher salaries pretty low.
Really?
I don't really know. So there's two components. First, there is definitely a huge difference between a bad teacher and a good teacher. I agree that a good teacher is so much better and has so much more of an impact on the kids than a bad one, obviously. But there's just so much that needs it more than the teachers, I guess. like, again, I would much rather that the money be spent to recruit an additional teacher that's going to reduce the class size from 30 to 20 than you get me the smartest, sharpest teacher to replace, me, the guy who came out of college and just has like a good, hopeful heart to make a difference. I think that whoever you put in that environment is going to struggle, and the fact that she may know the ins and outs, yeah, she'll manage better than me, but she'll still struggle. Right?
Of course.
And I think that you could certainly raise salaries, and I think you can see salaries vary across the country, but there's also kind of a limit on what you can do, right? Like, okay, if we say that the starting salary, let's say in Houston, is 55 or 50K, and it moves up to like 70 or 80, right? Okay, what are we trying to move that up to? If you add 5 on both sides of that scale, that's nice. It's not really changing the game for anyone. If you add 10, maybe. If you start adding like 20 or 30, again, like that money's not, I hate to say that there's like a zero sum, but I think that money's coming from somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And so the education system needs so much. I'm always happy to take additional money for teacher salaries, but that has to be not at the expense of the areas that need it more in the education system.
I guess that makes sense, that it would be great to pay the teachers more, but that's not going to fix the underlying issue. So we should, of course, pay the teachers more, but there's a lot of other problems with the education system: class size, proper funding from the state. And in Texas, which is a good example to use for this, is that and I don't know how accurate this is just my understanding of it, maybe you can correct me. The districts, the school districts, they are funded based on property taxes. Mm-hmm. And because of that, the richer, more affluent neighborhoods, they'll be able to fund their schools a lot better than poorer neighborhoods that, because they aren't able to fund it as well, this leads into poor administration and children not being provided the resources that they need to succeed. So it almost is, because of the way that schools are funded, it's a recipe for disaster for poor folks, and it's a recipe for success for the rich ones.
Rich get richer.
The rich get richer, yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the gears in the big machine that is continuing to fuel the rich and making them richer, and fueling the poor to continuously make them poorer.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
Wrapping up our conversation, we can definitely transition to a lighter note, like how we first met, how we were just two bachelors in Dallas looking for a good time. There were some good days there.
Dallas was a special time, man. And I want to make sure I'm clear about that. I don't think Dallas is that special a city. Sorry to any Dallas listeners, right? I think the people make it a special place. And I think Dallas can be as vanilla as anything otherwise. And so, when I was there, when you were there, when a lot of people were there, and, for me, it was September 2017. It might have been shortly after for you.
It was shortly before, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's such an exciting time in your life when you just got done with, whatever schooling, whatever job, whatever, anything and you're going to a new place in this time of your life where it's just like you said, the roads are open, right? And, I think the process of just, you have to put yourself out there, right? There's a lot of people, and people who know me know that I always have a continuous criticism of this. There's a lot of people who live their life with never actually having to put themselves out there, right? They either have always run with the same crew, they've always been in the same cities, they've always transplanted themselves from one city to another with the same 7 people they've known, so they never actually had to take any other risks, even if they changed their geography. That wasn't the case for me. I don't think it was the case for you. You may have known a few more people than I did. but that's what made it exciting. You know, it was like we kind of went to this new city, and it's like, hi, I'm Hendy. You know, how's it going? I'm not crazy, and you should give me a chance. You know, I still think that is such a defining time. You know, I, I fully believe college is like possibly one of the most defining, if not the defining times of your life. But the time that comes like shortly after has a huge impact as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand your perspective because I have a similar perspective. I tell majority, if not all my friends that are from Houston that I grew up with, that I went to college with, that, hey, if you ever get a chance of just getting outside of Houston, getting outside of your comfort zone, it's very healthy because then you'll go your whole life thinking that this is all I know, this is all there is. And once you're in a position where you're forced to make friends, not because someone has a gun to your head and says, make friends with other people, but you need that social interaction with, and you need to understand the community that is around you. How do I ingrain myself in this community? You pick up so many skills, social skills, you pick up so many friendships along the way. I mean, I had to do the same thing when I moved to Chicago of trying to figure out how to make friends here. And if I went from Houston to Chicago and never had Dallas in between, it would have been such a crazy adjustment for me. But this wasn't my first rodeo because I went to Dallas first. And in Dallas, initially, I only knew like one or two people. And then it eventually got to a point where over 4 years of living in Dallas, you know, some of my really close, even if they don't live in Dallas anymore, like you, for example, those are some of my most valued, some of my closest friendships. So when I tell people that I love Dallas, it's not even that it's just the city, other than ZOLs. Of course, I love ZOLs, but it's more than just the city. It's the people, it's the community, it's the Muslim community. I always think back and just value that point of my life so much.
And you get like so much like things you would have never experienced otherwise. You know, I fondly remember when I was leaving Dallas. You know, I crashed at your place for a couple nights, and you know, I discovered Death Note, one of the most amazing animes that I would have never checked out otherwise. And you know, I just got super enthralled with it, and that led to another great recommendation from you, which was Assassin's Classroom, I think is what it was.
Assassination Classroom.
Assassination Classroom.
Yeah.
And as I'm thinking about the names of these anime sound pretty scary, but they're not quite that scary. But they are they open up your window of the world to another kind of realm that you'd never considered, and just, you know, teaches you so much. And I guess it's just emblematic of the fact that like you don't know much, right? That's my opinion. As I go through anything, it's like I try to learn more every day, but I also recognize I don't know shit.
Dang, you're creating an analogy of your open-mindedness to watching anime to you just got to be open-minded with life.
Exactly. I'm just connecting all the threads. You really don't know that much about the world, about your subject area, whatever. Like, it's kind of this weird space because like I always tell people, act like you know what you're doing, always, right? Fake it till you make it. But at the same time, internally, understand you don't really know that much, right? And that's why, I mean, that might be a big reason why I love traveling so much, why I like trying new things, new foods, new experiences, is because, you know, I think the feeling of discovering something new and realizing you didn't know anything about that, one of the coolest feelings, right? Absolutely. Like, that shouldn't scare you, that shouldn't intimidate you or anything. It should just be like, you know, if I thought I was the shit before, I know I'm not that. And if I didn't, alhamdulillah, like I have confirmation, you know, like I know that like God's world is so wide, there's so much going on. I can only experience a bit of it, and that's just a constant reminder.
It gives you opportunities to be humbled.
Yeah.
That's with moving, living in a different city. That's with traveling. You realize that, wow, these people that to me are completely foreign or completely different from what I'm used to, they're out here living life, enjoying it, And you come to think that even when you visit countries that we think of the American dream as, oh, you have your own house and you have your own car and you just buy as much material wealth as you accumulate as much material wealth as you possibly can. And then you go to somewhere like Indonesia. When I went to Indonesia, I went to a small village and I saw some of the most happiest faces. And from a lens of America, you would think that, oh, these people, they don't really have anything. They live in small houses and they're all joint and their classroom is, very not typical of conditions of what you would consider a safe environment. But you go there and you're just very welcomed by the people. They, love visitors. They're just all connected as a community doing their thing. And it was just a very eye-opening experience for me that, wow, me having the nicest car or the best and latest gadgets, it doesn't mean anything if I don't have another outlook on life of this comfort that I had in Houston, Texas. If I don't look beyond that, then, that's all I'm going to know. Yeah. And I'm sure you've had similar instances in your travel, in your constant relocation that, hey, there's more out there than my circle that I grew up with. There's more out there than, just Houston or Clear Lake Islamic Center. There's more masjids out there. Not dissing Clear Lake Islamic Center great out masjid. Here. Great masjid. But it's just there's more out there in the world. And if you don't travel, if you don't experience life outside, if you are able to, of course, if you don't do those things, then you'll just be stuck in your bubble. You'll never develop the skills, unfortunately, to try new things.
I mean, that sounds like the perfect exit monologue for me. I don't know if I should be adding it.
When's our next trip? I mean, we did Hawaii. That's right. We did Zion National Park.
Hawaii, that needs a whole podcast by itself.
But yeah, we'll have to save that for another day. But Hendy, I appreciate you coming on, and of course, hopefully I'll continue to see you around. Maybe another episode of the podcast years and years down the road.
All right. Thank you, sir. Yeah.